Now, I didn't always think of myself as a leader, believe me. And Jen gave a little bit of the resume. I'm going to give you the short version because we have very little time today. I'm going to give you my I'm a two-time college dropout and a former drug addict. So I'm sure you're all glad you're with me on this webinar tonight after hearing that. But at any rate, you know, the age-old question, the debate is whether leaders are born or they're made. And I'd go a little bit step further, and I'd say leaders are transformed. And that's part of the reason I'm sharing this story with you. Years ago, and I'm sitting here in my home, not very far from where all this happened, you know, more than 30 years ago now. There I was living in Lake Sebago in Maine, Standish, Maine. And it's very, very cold up here in the wintertime. And there I was out there living in a 1950s vintage trailer with no heat. We always had money for drugs, but not enough money for heat. And on one particular evening, I remember pulling up my sleeping bag right up to my eyes. I didn't want to get out of that sleeping bag, believe me, at night. But nature called, and I went into the bathroom. I was doing my business. I noticed something sounded a little bit funny, and I flipped on the light, and there's a skim of ice across the toilet. So I looked up, and I saw myself in the mirror. I didn't like what I saw, and I certainly at that point said, this has to stop. Something has to change. But nobody likes a quitter, so we have to fast forward a little bit. And in the springtime, weather was a little bit nicer. We were having one of our Stonehenge parties. That's what we called our trailer. You get the picture now. We even had a sign over the door that said, "We are the people our parents warned us about." But at any rate, I used to smoke about 10 to 12 bong hits a day. If you don't know what that is, it's a water pipe. And the cool way to do it is you're supposed to pack the little bowl full and smoke it all the way down. And also did a lot of other ancillary drugs to keep the party going, so to speak. At any rate, as much pot as I smoked, I was usually pretty mellow. But this one particular day, somebody passed me a joint. And I wouldn't smoke a joint because I really couldn't get high on just a joint. And if I did smoke it, I smoked it all the way down, bogarted it, if you know what that means. And like I said, as much pot as I smoked, usually when I was high, I was pretty mellow. But something a little bit different kicked in that day. And I started running around the trailer and tried to jump out through the picture window of our trailer. My friends tackled me. They eventually got me put to bed, woke up in the morning. I'm back in that mirror. It looked like I went a few rounds with Mike Tyson. There was a lot of other details to that story that you'll hear in a longer version someday. But at any rate, I looked in the mirror, and really that was the day I said, this has got to stop. I've got to quit. And I did. And that was really the starting point. I didn't know it in the time, but that was the starting point of my transformation from a loser to a leader. What ended up happening was there were a lot of circumstances and conditions around me, a lot of luck involved, and it was up to me to really understand and embrace those opportunities and those different people that came into my life, those different opportunities and challenges that were able to help me transform from a loser to a leader. So that's part of the reason that I'm telling you that story. It's about transformation. Hopefully you didn't have a situation as bad as that. Some of you may have. Some may be worse, but that's what leadership is all about. What do we do with the circumstances and conditions that are presented to us, and how do we deal with that? Now, I should flip back and look at those little guys again. Those are my favorite little guys. It's funny. It's been about 3 years, I think, since I stopped working full time with my martial arts centers, and I see my black belts once in a while and train with them once in a while still, and they always ask if I miss them, and I say, hell no, I miss these guys. These are the little dragons. They're 3 to 6 years old. And throughout my career as a martial artist, as a professional martial artist, I'll tell you a lot of the lessons that I've learned about life and leadership came from working with these guys and came directly from these guys. Now, for years, we would run a leadership training program for the younger people. We called it a leadership team. And every year, one of the exercises was to give us three qualities that you would want in a leader, somebody that you're willing to follow. And these kids would come up with these words consistently: courage, compassion, and wisdom. Now, it's really cool because now that I get to network with folks that are, some heavyweights in the academic leadership world, I tell them the same story, and I ask them, I say, how did my kids do? And everybody always says, they did terrific. We can make this list quite a bit longer, but we really can't reduce it very much further. These are the key qualities of leadership. Let's go through these, and this is where we're going to start working some of the results in a little while from your survey. Let's talk about some of these things. And first of all, too, I should say this. What you're looking at now, that's a picture of my actual belt. And this is the greatest lesson that I learned from my life as a martial artist. Perfection is not a destination. It's a never-ending process. So when we're talking about qualities like courage, compassion, and wisdom, it's not just that we recognize them and that we have to train ourselves in these qualities constantly, continually. We have to care for them and nurture them and feed them. We can't just let them take care of themselves. They don't. That belt, I'll tell you a quick story about that. That's another part of the reason that I tell you about my resume. When I earned my black belt, it was the first meaningful accomplishment I ever had in my life. I should have been dead or in jail many, many times over. So believe me, when I strapped on that belt for the first time, that was the best day of my life. And my master, when I returned from the black belt test, gave me a special belt. It's a very, very thick, dark, beautiful, dark, rich black belt. But he's told me, he said, if you continue your life as a martial artist, this belt's going to change over time, and you can see that it did. And one of the things that happened, of course, is that it grays and starts to wear out. And as it does, the black covering frays away and reveals a white belt underneath. And that's on purpose, because the white belt represents, of course, the beginning, right? That's the first belt that we're recognized with as martial artists. And that reinforces this idea that perfection is not a destination. It's a process, and it's a never-ending process. So every time we strap on that belt, it reminds us of what we call in martial arts beginner's mind, which is really, truly the mind of the master. If you study any of the greatest leaders in business, in politics, in community service, anything, you're going to find the same principle at work, that these are people who are continually developing, learning, growing, constantly transforming themselves, and it never, never stops. The best leaders never put this process aside. Now, this is all, kind of cool philosophy that we can talk about, but we really have to bring it to work. So we're talking about, let me remind you again, these ideas: courage, compassion, wisdom. That's fine, but how do we get there? And that's what these 8 strategies are all about. Now, because we're short on time tonight, I'm going to highlight a couple of these, and then we're going to get into your results from the survey that you took. If you didn't take the survey, don't worry about it. It's really meant to instigate some thought and discussion, and we'll cover that in a couple of minutes. But I picked a few of the strategies that I've seen at work in NAWIC, because I've had the pleasure to work with you guys a couple times, and I have to say, I think NAWIC is just a tremendous organization. You guys are tremendous leaders, and I believe we're singing in harmony. And these are the strategies that I've heard from your feedback that you guys embrace the most and that you really embody the most. So first one is be tough, yet compassionate. I have to tell you a quick story about my friend and my old boss, Gordon. In one past life, I was a producer at a television station. I used to make television commercials. And one day, my boss, Gordon, called me in for a job review. I'm sure you've all been through that. At any rate, he sat me down and he said, Jim, your work sucks. And he said, your attitude sucks. In fact, you suck, is exactly what he said. And he said, if you don't straighten out, I'm going to have to fire you. Well, fast forward, to the weekend, and I was a young, brash guy, and I probably could have gotten really, really angry about the whole thing and just imagine, this is the man keeping me down again, and what does he know? But, I looked in the mirror. I really physically do this when I tell you this. The mirrors played an interesting role in my life, and I'll talk about that from time to time as we go through. But anyway, I did look in the mirror, and what I saw coming back was the realization that Gordon was absolutely right, that I had let my attitude slip. I'd really let my work slip, and I became disgruntled and angry and lazy. At any rate, it went in, and I got back, and I really was the best employee that they ever had for the next 6 months until I got laid off. But it was a different story and a different reason. It had nothing to do with work performance at that point. But at any rate, years later, I had the same situation with an employee at one of my martial arts centers. And I handled it in a similar fashion. I was a little bit more diplomatic or tactful, I should say, than Gordon was, but pretty much the same message. I was so pleased at the outcome that I called Gordon up on the phone and I said, you remember when you were going to fire me? And he said, well, no, not really. So I had to remind him of the story. And then when I got done reminding him of that, he said, well, Jim, you know what? He said, you're my friend. I wouldn't have fired you. And the only thing I could think of to respond with was, Gordon, it's a damn good thing I didn't know that at the time. You see, he really changed my life. That was one of the moments that really shaped who I was going to become later on. Now, Gordon was certainly tough, but the question is, was he compassionate? We confuse, I think, sometimes kindness with compassion, or softness or weakness with compassion, and we can't do that. we have to understand that compassion sometimes is very tough and sometimes can take on what might seem is even we call it a discompassionate tone or an unkind tone, and not at all. He was absolutely compassionate. He helped me see what I needed, and it centers on this word, respect. And if you think about that picture of those little guys again, one of the first times that I was asked to speak in public, it was on the subject of respect and responsibility, and it was for a group of elementary school students. The teachers in the school had noticed that the kids in my program were earning some really remarkable grades, and they were being very respectful. So they thought it was natural that they could bring Sensei Jim in, and maybe I could share those ideas and help the other little guys turn around. So it doesn't quite work that way all the time, but I was up for the challenge, and I opened by asking the question. If you've seen me present live, you've heard me ask this same question. Please give me a definition of the word respect. And I want you to think about that as I tell you this story. What does respect mean? We certainly hear the word all the time, we use it all the time, or we use its opposite, disrespect. Anybody that has kids understands that, obviously. But at any rate, I asked, for a definition of the word respect. And one little guy, he was about in third grade, I believe, he stood up and he made a fist and covered it over, which was our salute in martial arts. And he bowed to me and he said, Sensei, respect means taking care of one another. Well, I'll tell you, I can't imagine a better definition. I was so impressed with this young man. All I could think of to do was to stand up and bow to him and said, kid, you've got it. And again, that was one of these pivotal moments that I took with me, and it changed my life. I wish I could meet him because he truly did set me, I didn't know it at the time, but he truly set me on the course that I'm on now. And if we can hold that idea as a leader to take care of the people we serve, that's one of the great ideas that I think make somebody an effective and powerful leader. Now, again, when I'm presenting live, I always ask this question. Please chime in if you want in the chat. Who loves this show, Undercover Boss? Well, I hate this show, and if you could see me right now, I'm just about pounding on the top of the desk because I can't stand this show. And the reason is because leaders should not be that obtuse. Right? We have to know what's going on in every layer of the organization. At least we should know what's going on with the people we serve directly. Now, that leads us to another one of the strategies that the NAWIC folks feed back to me that they enjoy the most, and that's this one. Be a dedicated teacher, coach, and mentor. That means connecting with the folks that are with you. And I should say, too, before we go too much further, I was challenged one time at a presentation. It was organizations, I think the smallest organization in the room was probably somewhere around 1,000 people, and some of them had companies of 5,000, 10,000 or more. And one guy, a really big company, he raised his hand and he said, Jim, I can't get to everybody. There's 10,000 people there. I said, I know, but can you create a culture where everybody that works there has a direct relationship with the next person up the line, right? And I believe that as leaders, that's an obligation that we have. The people that we serve directly, and notice I keep saying that, not the people that work for us, but the people we serve directly, they should be able to have a connection with us. And that there's no better way to do that than to be a dedicated teacher, coach, and mentor. Tom Peters said it this way, and I love this. I always carry this. I'm kind of a quote junkie, as you can see, and that's part of the reason you're going to be able to have access to this slide deck. And please get with me on LinkedIn and whatnot. We'll trade quotes. But leaders don't create followers. They create more leaders. That's the job. Now, Charles Manson, Henry Sims, they're a lot smarter guys than I'm always asked, do you do research in these areas? Well, we don't need to. The research is out there. And it's so validating for what we're trying to share. They said it this way after doing a huge study of many, many companies, many leaders. It said, in many modern situations, the most appropriate leader is one who can lead others to lead themselves. We call this powerful new kind of leadership super leadership. Now, the word that got me here was new kind of leadership. Listen to this. A leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, we did it ourselves. Now, Lao Tzu said that almost 2,000 years ago. This stuff is not rocket surgery, and it's not new. But as we think back, think about that picture of my black belt that I shared with you. It's, perfection is a process, not a destination. We have to continually go back and remind ourselves of these and train or discipline ourselves to do these things. Fortunately, I read the rest of the article, and they said this: the super leader, which is their trademarked term for this, becomes super through the talents and capabilities of others. That's exactly what being a Sensei leader is all about. We can each only do so much, right? We become powerful as leaders by empowering others. Now, Stanford University, they generally have some pretty smart people there too. They did a huge study. This is cited from the Institute of Organization Development, and they identified this. Another, this is the word that got me here, critical area of development for CEOs was mentoring skills, developing internal talent. Are you kidding me? This should be the #1 area that we're worried about, because there's a leadership gap that exists in many industries and in many organizations all over the world. And the main reason for it is because we tend not to fully develop through mentorship, through coaching and training, the next generation of leaders. Then all of a sudden we expect younger leaders to step in and do their jobs. So this is an area, and I understand the reasons. Sometimes people say they're busy, there's other priorities at the time. But you've got to think about this. What is more important than developing that next generation of leaders? Or if we want to put it in a scary kind of context, what's going to happen if I'm not there tomorrow? Who's going to take over? Who's going to be able to do this job? A little story I like to share that really makes this imprint is, when I started my martial arts organizations, we didn't have black belts around. We only had beginners. I had a couple of guys hanging around that helped me found the system, and they were black belts. But everybody was around starting out, and they would call me Sensei. Now, I've never asked an adult to call me Sensei. The kids, we have to train some protocol, and I certainly have never asked anyone to call me Master. I'm a reluctant master if I am one at all. At any rate, when we went independent, we were very proud of this. We had to rearrange the way we did our ranks. We had to figure out how to promote ourselves, and we actually made it more difficult on ourselves. But the thing that we were most proud of is that, unlike a lot of systems, we developed a system where everyone could earn the top rank, which in our system was a 5th degree of black belt. And I wasn't the first one to promote there. One of the other people who helped me get the organization started was, I felt, more deserving, and we promoted him first. And since that time, 3 people have attained that rank. Several have become 4th, and several others have become 3rd degree. The neat thing is that when we started to promote people to these ranks, when we started to promote people to our level or even beyond, instead of calling me Sensei, they started calling me Master. See, when I elevated the students, they elevated me. And that's what, to me, that's what an effective teacher is all about. That's what an effective Sensei is all about. I don't want to train people to be my equal. I want to train them to surpass me. Lead by sharing. And I'm sure I'm going to say this a couple times before we finish up. I can sum up everything I know about leadership really in this strategy. Lead by sharing. Leadership is sharing, and a leader shares. We could say it that way. And we're back to Lao Tzu again so many years ago. The wise man does not lay up his own treasures. The more he gives to others, the more he has for his own. And that should be obvious to us, but again, this is one of these things that we lose sight of sometime with ambition, or we're worried about that bottom line. But this is the thing. The only way that we're going to accomplish those material goals is by having a powerful organization. An organization is nothing more than a group of people. So it's powerful people that make the organization successful. I said it this way in Sensei Leader: you grow as a leader and as a person in direct proportion to what you're willing to share with others. Again, that reinforces that thought, right? I can only do so much by myself. The more I can empower others, the more I'm willing to share, then the more powerful we're going to be as an organization, the more powerful we're going to be as a group. And the thing that we have to share most of all is power, which is your capacity or ability to act or perform effectively. That's all it is. We don't have time tonight to get into that debate, the difference between power and control. That can go on endlessly. But really, if you think about power this way, not as control, but as your capacity to perform effectively, then it doesn't have a quality of good or evil in itself. It's all about intent and application. Okay? So I believe that good people should embrace this idea that we want to become more powerful, and we want to share our power so that other people around us can be more powerful. And as leaders, that's critical. That's how we're going to succeed. We're only going to succeed by making other people powerful. Now, Shelley Kirkpatrick and Edward Lockyer, another couple of researchers, did a tremendous amount of study in this area. They came up with this. Power is an expandable pie, not a fixed sum. And what they meant by that, I think that's beautiful, because too many people, I think, try to be miserly with power. They try to hoard it, or they're afraid to share it because other people might take advantage. They might take my job, they might take my position, they might take something from me. It doesn't work that way. And like I said, just don't believe me, believe these guys that did the research. Power is an expandable pie, not a fixed sum. And again, they went on to validate what I was saying, that it only expands through sharing, through making other people powerful. And the cool thing is, you don't have to do it alone. I'm going to share a quick story with you. There was back in the day, I was messing around with boxing. It was a midlife crisis, and another part of the reason I told you about my past life as a drug addict. I was making up for a lot of lost time, and I got the opportunity to box. I think I was around 33 or 34 at the time, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. You don't want to start being a boxer at that age. But I had the opportunity, and I wanted to do it. I took full advantage of it. I was set up for my first fight, and I'm going to tell you my sanctioned record. I won't discuss my unsanctioned record, but my sanctioned record as an official fighter was 0-1, and always will be. I took one official fight, sanctioned fight, and I lost it. And originally I was set up to fight a guy who was about the same age, same experience as I was, but he scratched. He had the flu, and he couldn't make the fight. So just before the fight, my trainer Dave came up to me and said, "Don't worry about it. I got another fight for you." And I met the guy, young guy, really tall guy, had arms like an eagle. And if you've met me, I have arms like a penguin. That's what they called me. They actually called me the penguin then. My arms were short. So at any rate, nice kid. So I said, "Yeah, let's get it on. This will be fun." At any rate, I had broken my nose a couple of weeks before in training. He did it again for me in the first round. He turned me into a human Pez dispenser, if you can imagine that. It kept snapping my head back. I was expecting candies to shoot out my neck across the ring. And he finally knocked me down. And, of course, I had friends. I forgot to tell you, it was my birthday that day. So I brought a bunch of friends of mine. They were all sitting ringside. And there I was laying on my back looking up at the lights. And, of course, these vultures are sitting ringside. And what do you suppose they're yelling, right? "Get up, get up, get up." Of course, they came to be entertained, so I don't blame them. But at any rate, I somehow finished the round. And that's what I noticed. And I had been bugging my trainer earlier. I said, "The guy looks awful familiar over here." And what I was talking about was this kid's trainer. Turns out that this kid's trainer was the trainer for our two-time world champion, Joey Gamache from here in Maine. And I was fighting his kid. I mean, they had really set me up properly, right? And at any rate, so we get out of the ring, and I did tell you it was my birthday, I think, just a second ago. So my friends took me, let's call it, to an establishment for adult entertainment. And when we were there, my drink of choice at the time was a kamikaze. So we had a few kamikazes, and we were having a good time. And finally, I guess I was loose enough to look at them. And I said, "Do you guys love me?" And they said, "Sure, Jim, we love you. You're our buddy, you're our pal, all this stuff." And I said, "Well, listen, then the next time I get laid out like that, all I want to hear from you guys is stay down, stay down." Well, it took me some years to really understand that I was wrong. I was absolutely wrong. Those are exactly the kind of people you want in your corner, and that's what NAWIC is all about. That's what an organization like this is all about. And it's really a joy and an honor to know a lot of you, have met a lot of you personally, and to know the organization. And so I can say that. And believe me, I don't work with organizations I don't believe in. Life is too short to do that, and aggravation has a dollar value. So at any rate, I work with NAWIC because I believe in what you're doing. I believe in your mission, and I know that we're singing in harmony. And the people that are with you in NAWIC are these kinds of people. They're the people that are going to pick you up when you're down. They're the kind of people that are going to get you off the ropes and put you back in the fight, even when it's tough, even when you don't think you might pull it out. So anyway, I just wanted to leave you with that thought, and let's blaze on. Please remember these as we go through the next portion. You lead people, not process. If we were talking about management, we'd be talking about process, and that's every bit as important. But if we're talking about leadership, you lead people, and we have to be sensitive. We've talked about this. Leadership is sharing. A leader shares, and I'm sure we're going to hit that again. After I wrote The Sensei Leader, I was interviewed for a radio show, and the person asked me to sum everything up that I could share about leadership in just a couple of bullet points. And this is what I said. If you want to be an effective leader, you really only need these three things. You need to learn more, listen more, and you will fear less. Now let's get into the results. And please, like I said, there's a chat area over here, and I'm kind of keeping a weather eye on it. If you have something to add, thoughts, comments, questions, just pop it in there, and we'll get to it. I think you guys had some very, very interesting results. Oh, I'm sorry, I should say this too. If you've downloaded already the Sensei Leader Workbook, that's kind of cool to follow along as we go through the different questions and strategies. You can make some notes and work on that on your own. I know we only have a little bit of time here tonight, but that's something that you can certainly do on your own. And if you'd like, I'm glad to visit, of course, and do full workshops where you do half days and full days on this and break it down in detail. If you didn't get those materials, just go to thatblackbeltguy.com/online-workshop-materials, and you can get everything you need right there. And if you miss it, hey, just shoot me an email or hook up with me on LinkedIn, or I'm sure Jen will provide those materials as well. Okay, now a couple of warnings as we go to this. First of all, the SL15 that you did, if you didn't do it, don't worry about it. Okay, these things are really designed to instigate some discussion and some thought. So as we're going through, hopefully as you see these results, you can just plug yourself in and say, oh, I might have answered that way, or I might not have, and it'll give you something to think about. Okay, but it is a self-assessment. It's not a scientific survey. If we really wanted to do the scientific part, and we do this from time to time, we would also survey the people you serve and see if you're in alignment, see if you perceive yourself the same way that they do. But anyway, a self-assessment is very useful and to stimulate thought and discussion. And also, I can tell you from experience that the folks at NAWIC have been very, very honest and transparent about the way they answer these questions. So I'm sure that you're going to be in the right area. And these are artifacts. What I mean by that, for instance, we just went through the Super Bowl thing, which is kind of cool. But there's a certain type of language, a culture, a protocol that happens in a football locker room that may not be appropriate for other businesses, for other areas. So if we take something, for example, like we want to be kind to everybody, or we want to be polite in the work area, and that becomes an artifact of your culture. What does it mean? Okay, we have to imprint it on, the specific culture, the specific organization to really understand it. The language that's accepted, like I said, in that locker room might be very, very different in your workspace. So, and conversely, in a football locker room, they may be very off-put, or may feel that they're not being paid enough attention to if somebody isn't yelling and screaming at them. So all the results that we have here and the different things we're going to talk about are artifacts. You have to ask yourself these questions. What do these results mean to the organization? Or what do they mean to you as an individual? And think about this question as we go through. Who are you? And I really mean that to be very, very specific. Who are you? Who are you to the people around you, to the people you serve, to the people you answer to? Who are you when you look in the mirror? And a little sidebar, I really mean that. That's a physical exercise that I do. I do it before I'm presenting. I used to do it before I was teaching. I do it sometimes when I'm struggling with an issue. I go and I look in the mirror and I ask myself that question, but I want that physical connection, that feedback. Most of our communication is nonverbal. It works with ourselves as well. Look in the mirror and see if that's the person you want to be right now. Who do you serve? Who do you serve? And I mean being very specific about that. Little quote from Confucius: wisdom, compassion, and courage are the three universally recognized moral qualities of men. I think they're the most important qualities of a leader, and of course the research, like I said, backs that up for us now. So let's dig into what you guys thought about it. The first area you were polled about was courage. Okay, now what is it? What is courage? I usually say, courage is certainly not the absence of fear. The absence of fear is stupidity. And I was very validated to find out that Nelson Mandela actually stole that from me. So he said it this way: I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. I think you're going to find that you guys were singing in harmony with Nelson Mandela. This first question was, there is no growth, right? No growth without exposure to risk. And you guys were off the chart with this. You all agree with it. Sometimes there's a little dissent because it's not the only way to grow, but it certainly is a good one. And think about this as leaders as well. it's not just that we're exposing ourselves, or we are exposed, like it or not, to risk, but can we expose other people to risks, so to manageable risks, so that they can grow and they can have the same opportunities for growth that we had. Challenges, this goes along with it, challenges and obstacles are the best way to test my talents. Now, if you disagreed and you'd like to chime in, you won't be put on the spot, but I always like to know why, and there are no right or wrong answers to these questions either. Like I said, they're to instigate thought and discussion, but they are carefully crafted in order to elicit, I want to know why. If someone disagrees, I'd like to know why. And if we were live in the room, I'd be pressing you a little bit harder on this. A lot of times, I'll just share from experience, a lot of times people will disagree with this because of the word best. And we purposely kept that word in the question to instigate just that type of thought. Is it the best way? Well, arguably, some people can find better ways to do it. But challenges and obstacles are certainly a great way to test your talents. And it takes courage to face those challenges and obstacles. This one's interesting. It takes genuine courage to be creative and innovative. There was a larger, I'd say a little bit larger than normal answer of not necessarily. Okay, a few more of you answered that way than we've seen in a lot of groups. That's okay. Again, I'd like you to think about that. Why not? Sometimes the question centers, a lot of times the question centers on the definition of courage. And I'm going to go quickly through this. There are three types of courage, really. There's heroic courage. That's obvious. It's when somebody runs into a burning building to save children from a fire, that's the heroic courage. We can see it. We all understand that. It's not the easiest one to do, but certainly the easiest one to recognize. Okay, then there's moral courage. That's a little bit different. So we're able to recognize what is the right thing to do, and do we have the wherewithal to do it. And then there's artistic courage. Artistic courage is one of the most difficult ones to understand. I believe strongly it does take genuine courage to be creative and innovative. Now, the reason that's so important as a leader is because we have to ask ourselves, are we providing an environment where people feel that they can take a chance, they can take a risk, right? You just said that's important. Risk, challenges, and obstacles are all important to your development as a leader. Are you providing that opportunity to the other people that you serve, to the leaders you're trying to develop? Are you seeking those opportunities out for yourself? Artistic courage means exposing your ideas to scrutiny, really, is what it's all about. And like I said, that does have some risk. I feel it every time I present. I'm going to be really, I'm going to expose myself right now. Webinar, I think Alex probably told Jen this before this. This is not my most comfortable format. I feel most comfortable in the room because then I can see you, we can interact. There's a lot of nonverbal communication going along. I don't know what your reaction is to my thoughts and ideas right now. I have no way, I have no feedback. So it does, it does require some courage to go ahead and just do my best, expose what I can, and hope that the results come out the way that they're productive, I should say. Okay, and that's what we're talking about. So ask that for yourself. Look in that mirror again. Are you willing to expose your ideas to scrutiny? It does take courage to do that. And if you want a creative and innovative workforce, organization, if you want the people you serve to be creative and innovative, you've got to make sure that you're also providing fertile ground for them to be able to do that, to expose themselves that way, and to do it, fail or succeed, to be able to do that and move forward. Doing the right thing is always the most important consideration. You guys were very, very consistent there, strongly agree and agree. And some folks said there are exceptions. Now, again, most of the time, well, chime in on the chat if you have a different idea, but most of the time when I hear exceptions and we discuss them out in the room, usually centers on the idea of policy, and this comes up a lot with salespeople. There may be a policy in place. This is the right way to do it. And yet on the ground, you may find that you have to do something a little bit differently. So you do have to decide which is the right way, what's appropriate to that situation. When we're talking about doing the right thing, though, too, we also want to think about there are some times, particularly when we're talking about deep values and principles, we're talking about entrenched ethics, that there is a specific right thing. And we have to recognize that for our organizations, understand what that is, and those are the ones that are intractable. We have to make sure that we honor that. And which of these statements best defines courage? You guys are off the chart. We don't have to belabor this. It's acting right despite your fear or managing your fear. And just so you know, as we go through the blue and the green, are usually pretty good. When we see orange and red, then we have to take a look at that. Okay. It's certainly not hiding fear. That's the worst thing we could do. Certainly not the absence of fear. The absence of fear is stupidity. Now think about this, and again, because we're doing a fairly short program today, work through this on your own. How is courage expressed in your organization? And how can you cultivate courage yourself and in the people you serve? These are the two key questions that you have to address as leaders when it comes to courage. Compassion. The good folks at Gallup did another one of their great polls, this one about 10,000 people. They asked what qualities people wanted or they felt was most important in their leaders. And this is consistently, they do this poll from time to time, compassion, trust, stability, hope. Looks an awful lot like what those kids came up with, doesn't it? You guys answered this question. I'm comfortable expressing my feelings frankly with others. And most of you are. Sometimes, if you answered sometimes, all I'm going to do is encourage you to say, what can you do? That just means maybe there's room for improvement. Okay? It's not necessarily your fault, though. We have to analyze this on a lot of different levels. And again, we're talking about artifacts. We don't know what exactly it means in the framework. I just worked with an organization where there were communication problems. And it wasn't necessarily the group that I was working with were expressing themselves fairly clearly. They should have been understood, but the method of communications caused a breakdown. So that's how, again, you look at the not right or wrong answers, but to stimulate the thinking. It's important to solicit input from key players at all levels. There was a little bit of dissent here, not much, a little bit of dissent. And this is one of the few questions that really, it does have kind of a, it is leading, I suppose, to as close to an absolute as I ever get. And that is, I do believe that. It is important to solicit input from key players at all levels. Sometimes the disagreement comes from an acceptance of responsibility. We say, well, it's really my responsibility to make decisions. And so, but think about that again. Why did you answer that way if you disagreed? And we can certainly go into that in more detail. How often do you openly recognize people for a job well done? I think you guys are doing a great job with that. Frequently, sometimes. Nobody said never. This is a key area. We know from studies that that people need recognition. Okay, recognition is important, and it's up to us as leaders to find a way. Now, the only caution that I'll say is this, and it doesn't matter. I learned this a lot from working with kids for so long, but it works the same way with adults as well. If we're going to praise, we have to make sure that praise is sincere, meaningful, and substantive. It's terrible to go out and give hollow praise. The example I use sometimes is when we were teaching martial arts to adult classes. If an instructor went out and looked at somebody who was flaying around and said, oh, you did a great job. Well, that person's looking in the mirror. They can see they're not doing a good job. They're looking over their shoulders, feeling like everyone in the room thinks they look like an idiot. So the worst thing you can do is go up and say, you did a good job. And what I would teach my instructors to do is, hey, instead of just saying that, which is meaningless, walk up and say, you know, your stance is a little bit deeper. It looks like you got a little more centering, a little more rooting today. That's a step in the right direction. Now let's work on and fill in the blank to the next thing. So find something meaningful to praise and go from there. I get as much satisfaction from the success of others as I do from my own accomplishments. And most of you who strongly agree. About the same. That's an honest answer. Strongly disagree. That was just not disagree, strongly disagree. I'll just say this. I remember a workshop I was doing about a year ago or so, and this was really a lot of fun to hear that. I found the guy who said he strongly disagreed, and I said, how come? He said, because there's no way that what you do is going to make me feel as good as what I do. And I said, well, you know what? I'm glad you're honest about it, and I left it at that. But I will say this. There's a certain point in every leader's career where what you're doing doesn't have the same emotional impact as what the people you serve are doing. And that's something that's very valuable. When you look at top leaders, they always pay attention to the progress, to the accomplishments of others. And that's what this question really is meant to stimulate. And how well do you know your coworkers and subordinates? I made a note here. I think overall, this group could probably use some work in this area. Welcome to Black Belt class here. I have to be tough yet compassionate, right? Yeah, look at that. If you answered some well, others not. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to know everything. You don't want to be intrusive, right? You don't want to poke into people's personal lives. That's not really what we're after here. But to really know what motivates someone, and that's a key question. People ask me this all the time because they somehow put me in that motivational speaker label sometimes, and I hate that because, in fact, a couple of years ago was the first time it really happened. Someone said, all right, Jim, you're supposed to be a motivational speaker. How do you motivate people? And I said, hell if I know. So you're talking about a specific group. We have to sit down, or an individual. We have to sit down with that individual and try to find out what motivates that person. Ask them, why are you working here? What are you doing this for? You know, and sometimes you get some surprising answers. You get some really surprising answers. But once you understand what that person's individual motivations are, then you can start the process of negotiation. You know, what does that person really need? How can you help fulfill their ambitions and their dreams? So there it is. I would say if you answered some well, not others not, and that's purposely worded that way too. You've got to be very careful. If you want to be consistent, is really the thought there. Ask yourself these questions as you think about compassion. How important is compassion in your culture? And how do you express compassion in your organization? And wisdom. Wisdom, I'm just going to give you the martial arts definition of it. Knowledge and experience tempered by awareness. That's the mirror again. We've got to make sure that we're constantly looking at ourselves and understanding who we are, where we're going, what we want to do. Self-assessment, right? Perfection is not a destination. It's a never-ending process. You probably hear that from me a lot. So knowledge and experience certainly, but tempered by awareness. That makes the difference. That's what makes it wisdom. I'm usually well aware of how my words and actions are perceived. Not bad. Sometimes surprised. I like that because it usually means people are honest. And I really don't see any problem here. I think you guys are pretty well squared away in this area. When is it appropriate to relax personal and professional development? Never was the overwhelming response. And I have to say, if there's one question here that I personally think has one answer, it's this one. And to me, it's never. But I understand the other responses sometimes. Again, because it's a one-way communication here, it's hard to dig into it. But just think about it. When successful, when a goal is reached or approaching a goal, if you answered in any of those ways, just consider that. Let that instigate a little bit of thought. We should never relax our personal and professional development efforts. Personal and professional development are inseparable. Interesting that there was so much disagreement here, so I'm going to leave you with a little bit of thought. The human brain, this is, don't believe me, this is what the scientists say. We don't separate, the human brain doesn't separate personal and professional development. When we learn something, and there's some very powerful tools, learning a new language and playing a musical instrument, two of the most powerful tools to develop your brain. Martial arts really appears that, and you know, it's not only just a nod to my brothers and sisters in the arts, but you know, there's a lot of studies that are done that shows that it really has an impact there. But your brain doesn't all of a sudden say, okay, because I'm stronger in conceptual processes that I learned from playing piano, when I go to work, I shut that off. No, it doesn't work that way. When you develop personally, it carries over professionally. And particularly for leaders, we're talking about those soft skill areas we're going to get into in a couple of minutes. We need to develop our personal, interpersonal skills, our communication skills, the things that don't fall directly into that technical management bucket, because those are influential in your professional development as well. How important is emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills? You guys are off the charts with this. Most of you said equal, some said soft skills more important. I'd ask you to think about that question because the technical skills are important, your domain skills are important, but are they any more or less important than the soft skills? And nobody said hard skills there. Ideas and vision must always flow from the top down. And again, you guys are pretty much off the chart. Right, there was one person that agreed with that answer, and I have to tell you that most of the time when we find that, again, it's a responsibility situation. I'm the leader. I should be creating the vision. You should be managing and nurturing that vision. Don't always have to create it, and certainly ideas should flow in both directions. I love this quote, "The only true wisdom is in knowing that you know nothing," and Socrates said that many, many years ago. So your questions for this one to think about: how are you cultivating and sharing wisdom in your organization? And how strong is your mentoring process? Are you sharing that, right? with others directly. And I strongly encourage all of you to have a formal mentoring process in place, and we can certainly help with that. All right, the next set of questions really had to deal with the specific strategies that we talk about that help us build ourselves as courageous, wise, and compassionate leaders. Strategies are important. This is a cool old saying as well. All men can see these tactics whereby I conquer, but none can see what none can see is the strategy out of which victory is involved. And that's from Sensei, The Art of War, which has now become required reading at most business colleges. Never limit yourself to one leadership style. I usually do a joke when I'm live. I put up a picture of a light bulb and say, how many black belts does it take to screw in the light bulb? Well, the answer is about 100. It takes one to actually perform the operation and 99 others to tell you how they would have done it better. And in leadership, we could multiply that joke by about 1,000. The key is, though, that there isn't really one leadership style that works in all situations. That's an academic debate we don't have time for tonight. But the key strategy is this. And the question that we wanted to do to expose that is, I am familiar with and utilize several leadership styles depending on the situation. This, I have to be honest, room for work here. If you answered sometimes, somewhat, or rarely, then you really have to look at yourself and say, what can I do to understand, learn, and apply different leadership styles? That's something we get into intensively in workshops, and we can certainly spend an awful lot of time digging into these different styles. But we have so much access to that information. Short trip online, and you'll find lots of materials. Go to my website, thatblackbeltguy.com. We pick a lot of materials for you there. There's a lot of videos that we have up. The blog is certainly a good area. And our new podcast we're so proud of, Walking the Walk. We're interviewing leaders. We're going to interview folks from NAWIC, I'm sure, in the not-too-distant future. There were a few people I had on a list. And they're sharing their ideas. How do you apply these strategies? How do you live this life that we're talking about? But there's certainly plenty of resources available to us. And my favorite is just reading biographies. I want to know, and I'll recommend two for you when I'm asked and pressed about, what are the top two books on leadership that I rely on: the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin and the autobiography of Malcolm X. Those are two of my big ones. Another one that I'm looking at right now is by Alan Axelrod, and it's called Patton on Leadership. George Patton is, in my mind, one of the most brilliant leaders that we've had, and more compassionate than some people might think. But those are some good resources. Be tough yet compassionate. Let's see how you do with that. The question was, I understand the motivations, ambitions, and concerns of the people I serve. I do not confuse kindness with compassion, and I'm willing to be tough when the situation requires it. Guys did pretty well with that. Usually and always were high percentages. There was a lot of responses, sometimes somewhat, and again, I think those are honest responses. All right, and usually when I dig into that one, I hear people saying a very common reason for that is, well, I really do want to be kind to people. I want to be liked. Okay, that's all cool, but again, let that stimulate some thought and just ask yourself, are there situations where you need to be a little bit tougher, right? Where sometimes kindness is not necessarily compassionate, that people need a little bit more tougher love in those situations. Now, commit yourself to personal and professional mastery. We hit that in the other sections. This is a strategy, that, especially for aspiring leaders. If you want people to recognize you and give you opportunities for leadership, then commit yourself to personal and professional mastery. You make yourself better. You make yourself a more valuable resource, and then the opportunities will present themselves. I'm consistently engaged in my own learning, growth, and development, personally and professionally. You guys did very well with that. Sometimes, somewhat. Again, look at yourself. How can you find more opportunities? There's certainly plenty of them out there. There are plenty of seminars, webinars, books, videos. YouTube is a gold mine. And audio books. I call it Dashboard University. I joined Audible a long time ago, and it's very seldom when there's not a book in progress that I have going either in the car or in the gym. Great opportunities for us to learn and grow all the time. Never, if you said never, you got work to do. I'm being honest with you. Get to it. Get to it. I don't know if I have another way to say it. That's a little bit tough but compassionate. You've got to be engaged in your own learning, growth, and development, especially as a leader. How can you ask others to grow and develop and become more productive if you're not doing it yourself? Be confident yet humble. Lead by example. I model the behavior I expect from others. It's just what we were talking about. I'm reasonably confident in my own ability to perform based on my training and preparation. You guys are very, very strong in this area. Again, the challenge is sometimes, somewhat, or never. Take a look in the mirror, see if you can do better. And in this one, we always, all of these strategies, again, you just can't leave them aside and expect that they're just going to be part of your life. They have to be cultivated, nurtured. These are things we have to revisit all the time. I believe in the workbook that you downloaded, you'll have those, and there's some other books available in your links that you can access. Be flexible, adaptable, and comfortable with uncertainty, particularly for aspiring leaders. This is one of the biggest benchmarks for leadership opportunity these days, and across the world, this is one area that we're finding a lot of deficiency in. That people are they're not comfortable with uncertainty. We need to train ourselves to do this. And again, as I've said about a couple of the other strategies already, as leaders, we need to provide opportunities for people to face and deal with uncertainty if we want them to develop as leaders. I'm comfortable dealing with unforeseen circumstances, conditions, situations. I embrace uncertainty as a welcome opportunity. You guys are very, very strong in this. And as we have just said with the other couple, if you answered sometimes, somewhat, or rarely or never, room for improvement. Just take a look at it. Ask for situations that challenge you, if that's part of the problem. And make sure that, again, we're exposing folks that we want to develop to this uncertainty. Think about, if you're comfortable there, think about how you got that way. I don't believe there's any shortcuts. We get comfortable dealing with uncertainty by exposing ourselves to it. Be a skilled communicator. One of the top things, and when we get to your comments, you're going to see that that was an issue. I'm reasonably articulate. Most people understand what I'm saying, so on and so forth. Here, if you said sometimes, somewhat, I really do think you're being honest. So at any rate, this is something we want to strive for, and we've got to bridge this across technologies now, right? It's much different to communicate by text or email than it is in person. Be a dedicated teacher, coach, and mentor. I share my knowledge and experience and wisdom without reservation or hesitation. I enjoy helping others learn. You guys are off the charts with this. This is really a strong response, I think. And again, as always, sometimes, somewhat, never, room for improvement. Let's get to it. And lead by sharing. I'm comfortable with the idea that power expands through sharing. I'm willing to share power and authority with others. We beat that into the ground throughout the whole program tonight. Anytime you see me, that's a theme that we definitely beat into a dead horse. But again, you guys very, very strong in this area. Okay. Pick a strategy to focus on. How will you implement it? And how will you monitor and measure? So again, this is your homework. You're going to take this and work on it after the webinar. Pick a strategy to focus on. How will you implement it? And how will you monitor and measure that? And that's sometimes the most difficult when we're talking about soft skills, interpersonal skills, these types of strategies. Sometimes very difficult to measure direct results. Don't worry about that so much. Sometimes it's just a matter of, let's say, for instance, the mentoring part. We want to develop as mentors. What you can really track is, are people coupling as mentors and mentees? Is there a process in place for that? And is that process accessible to everybody? That's what you can measure. Now, here are some of the comments that you guys had. And please, if you hadn't chimed in on the chat yet, I haven't seen, I don't know if that's working or not, but please chime in on this one. And I'm just going to offer a couple of my thoughts, and then we'll really open it all up for discussion too. What other leadership challenges, opportunities, or issues would you like to discuss? One was this one. This is interesting. Steering a team through transition in leadership requires a period of self-directed leadership. When I saw that, I was really psyched because it's all about self-directed leadership, isn't it? And it's about leadership at all levels. The idea is steering a team through transition. You know, how do we do that? That requires a lot of thought. It requires a lot of strategizing. I'm going to ask you to do this. Think about the strategies we just talked about and which ones would be useful to help you in this area. Self-directed leadership. It's all about that personal and professional mastery, isn't it? It's about digging in and saying, what do I need to do? What skills do I need to acquire? What new knowledge, wisdom, energy that I have to find in my life in order to engage in this process? Okay. Somebody started typing a Sensei thing. Sensei, go ahead, but yeah, keep on typing. That's all I see is Sensei. Best approach to dealing with a manager that is not a good communicator. This was a theme, and I'm going to check the next slide because I think, yeah, communication with the next generation, facilitating a good work ethic in people who don't seem to have one, inspiring others, okay, maintaining positive attitude. All of these things have to do with communication. For years, people would, and it was really an imprint when we used to do our instructors' colleges, and people would always ask me, said, Jim, you still teach beginners classes. How are you so enthusiastic about that? You know, I said, well, because I get off on what they're doing, and we touched on that earlier, more than what I'm doing. I really enjoy seeing people learn and grow and develop. That's part of it. But the thing about this, with the communication, you know, how do you get people to maintain a positive attitude? How do you inspire others? How do you facilitate a good work ethic? The only thing that we have control over is our own actions. So to me, it's you want to inspire others, be inspired yourself, right? You want to maintain a positive attitude, maintain your own positive attitude. Facilitate a good work ethic. Work hard. You know, now, at some point, and if anybody's out there is a Stephen Covey fan, you may remember he had a great out clause for leaders, and I think it's an important one. Okay, one of his principles, one of his major principles of successful people were that every situation, every negotiation had to be win-win or no deal. And that's the important out clause. Sometimes you brought people into the organization that don't fit your culture, that don't fit your style, that just aren't a good fit or a good mix for you. And you can't be afraid. We're back to tough yet compassionate. Cut them. Get rid of them. Get them out of there. If not, you're not being compassionate to the other people who are really working hard. And I'm going to skip back, make sure I just didn't miss that part. Let's see what we got. Thought I was going to skip back. Oh, dealing with someone who isn't a good communicator. That's a very simple answer. Training. Training, but make sure, like I said, don't leave this to chance. Make sure that you've got a process installed. I recommend for most organizations to have some kind of formal communication, technical communication training, at least on an annual basis, maybe semi-annual, sometimes even quarterly. Make sure people understand the protocols. This is how you communicate by text. This is how you communicate by email. This is what a memo looks like. This is how you do a live presentation if you have to do those. Make sure people understand that. Don't leave that to chance. Too many organizations leave that to chance, or they expect that people are going to go outside for that information. And from a leader's perspective, if your organization doesn't offer it, then yes, go outside. There are so many opportunities. If you're not good at presenting, go to Toastmasters. A lot of organizations host Toastmaster groups so that their people will have access to it. There are a lot of other good opportunities for that. But make sure that you're doing it. It's a formal process. And then again, if you have somebody that's resistant to that, that's the thing. You know, you can teach leadership. You can't teach leader, can you? Right? A leader is forged by a lot of different circumstances, conditions, opportunities, challenges, a lot of different things. We create ourselves as a leader out of these different challenges and opportunities, circumstances, and conditions. And how we respond to that is very individual. But the big key that I've seen throughout successful leadership is that people are willing to embrace that process. We're back to that same thing again. Perfection is not a destination. It's a never-ending process. People that are willing to embrace that process are the ones that are more likely to emerge as effective leaders. So we can teach leadership. We can't teach leader. If someone is unwilling to learn and grow at any level, I don't care. There are people that are CEOs of huge companies that are fired because at some point the board discovers they're unwilling to learn and grow and develop, so they get rid of them. Oh, Doreen, thank you very, very, very much for that. Let's go on to the next question. Oh, it's not a question. We're back to because I guess we're about out of time, aren't we? It looks that way. I want to leave you with a few key thoughts. And this one, I said earlier, I'm sure, and I mean it from the heart. This is the greatest gift that my life in martial arts gave to me, was just the awareness of this philosophy. Perfection is not a destination. It's a never-ending process. Now, I can sum up everything I know about leadership in just a few short thoughts. I'm going to share that with you. And I'm going to stay around. Like I said, we're open. Maybe, Jen, maybe you can open the microphones. I don't know if people want to chat or if they just want to chime in. We can do it that way in just a minute. And like I said, I'm glad to hang around with you for a few minutes. And I should say this, I'm always thrilled to work with NAWIC. We've had a heck of a good time at the events. Mystic was wonderful. Nashville was wonderful. You guys are party animals. It was great to hang around with you and get to know you socially as well. I very much look forward to the next one. And that really puts us in the room together and we can get a lot done. So never be afraid to look me up there. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. I live on LinkedIn, very easy to find there. Or you can connect with me, I'm sure, through Jen, and we can continue this discussion. Or if you want some individual attention, we can do that too. So anyway, few thoughts just to really sum up everything that I know about leadership. Leadership is sharing. A leader shares. You lead people. And like I said, if you want to be an effective leader, really these are the only 3 things you need. Learn more, listen more, fear less. Hey, thanks for spending the time with me. And like I said, Jen, do you want to open up the mics and see if people want to chat a little bit? Shauna, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jim. That was wonderful. And I'm going to unmute everyone now, so if anybody has anything they want to say to Jim, let me know. Go ahead. The mics are open.
Wonderful job.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's great.
Looking forward to seeing you in person.
Oh, and me too. You know, and who's this?
Oh, my name's Christine. I'm from New Orleans.
Oh, from New Orleans. Oh, good. Yeah, I haven't been there yet. I'm looking forward to getting into that area.
All right. Thank you so much. It was great. I hope everyone learned a lot.
We did. I can't wait to go down.